In this week's Haftorah, we find the prophetic voice of Yeshayahu condemning the worship of God in God's house, telling people not to come in. As we read, Ki tavo lerot panai mi bikesh zot miedchem ramos chatzerai. Who asked you to trample my courts? Lo tosifu avimin chatshav ktoret toeva. Don't bring any more disgusting sacrifices. This prophetic voice is not only found in the book of Isaiah, but throughout the prophets. In Hosea we read, Ki chesed chafatzti velo zavach dat Elohim me'olot. God wants loving kindness over sacrifice. But this message is not found in the Torah itself, at least not explicitly. Where do the prophets come off telling us that without proper ethical behavior, God isn't interested in our ritual worship? The problem is exacerbated ostensibly by a pasuk in the prophet Yirmiyahu, who we read in these Haftorot of the 3 weeks, and also in the Haftarah of Tisha B'Av. In chapter 7, Yirmiyahu says, in the name of God, Ki lo dibarti et avoteichem velo tzivitim b'yom hotzi otam eretz Mitzrayim al divrei olah v'zavach. Yirmiyahu says, in the name of God, that God never mentioned on the day we left Egypt the laws of sacrifices. But if we look in the Torah, at least at first glance, it seems not to be true. The Torah, of course, after we left Egypt and got the Torah is filled with laws of sacrifice. All of the end of the book of Shemot and all of the book of Vayikra is all about the Mishkan, about the tabernacle, about the temple, about the sacrifices. How can Yirmiyahu say that God never mentioned it? How can the other prophets say that all of those sacrifices, which take up much more of the Torah than the other mitzvot in the Torah, how can they say that God isn't interested in sacrifice unless we do those other mitzvot first? Rabbi Yuval Sherlow visited our yeshiva a few weeks ago and Kibbutz Ma'ale Gilboa, and he gave a shiur on Shabbat afternoon where he presented a stunning insight in the pasuk that I just read to you from Yirmiyahu. In fact, if one reads the verse very carefully, Yirmiyahu didn't say that God never mentioned the laws of sacrifice. Yirmiyahu said that God didn't mention the laws of sacrifice right after we left Egypt. And what Rabbi Sherlow suggests is that Yirmiyahu is giving us a tremendous chidush, a tremendous new insight into how to understand the Torah. And that is that the order of the Torah is significant. And the order that the mitzvot in the Torah presented creates a hierarchy in the importance of the mitzvot. And in fact, when we left Egypt and we began to receive the Torah on Sinai, the first mitzvot that God gave us were the Aseret HaDibrot, which of course include all of the laws of ethics, of not murdering, of not stealing, of respecting our parents, of not having idolatrous worship. All of those serve as the basis, says Rav Sherlow, for the rest of the Torah. On the day we left Egypt, God didn't mention Olah and Zavach. That came later, after the Ten Commandments, after Parshat Mishpatim, where the Torah instructs us to set up a civil society. Only after all of those mitzvot does the Torah begin to mention the Mishkan and the sacrifices. And that is why all of the prophets can say, until you've done those other mitzvot, don't bother visiting the temple. In fact, there is a priority in the Torah. First comes a civil society, first comes ethics, first comes loving kindness, and on that basis we build worship of God. Thought of the phrase from Chazal, Kadma derech eretz leTorah. Perhaps we could make a play on words in light of Rav Sherlow's insight into this pasuk of Yirmiyahu, that actually Kadma derech eretz baTorah, that in the Torah the first things that we get are those mitzvot that have to do with our ethical essence. Shabbat Shalom.